Ryzen 5 3600 with RTX 3070. Is this combo worth it or not? I've been using this combo from an year since the launch of the Ampere lineup. This was the cheapest GPU you could get at $500 to enter the Ampere lineup. Now first talk about the CPU. It's a 3rd gen Ryzen 5 with 6 cores and 12 threads and a base clock of 3600 MHz and a boost clock of 4200 MHz. If we move to the GPU I'm using is from Zotac. It's their twin fan variant called Twin Edge with no RGB. It's the OC version, which means it's factory overclocked. It's priced similar to the Founders Edition of 3070. CPU bottleneck is a situation when your CPU is not powerful enough to cope up with your GPU. In CPU bottleneck situations, your CPU is gonna run at 70 to 90% and it can even run at 99% all the time, and your GPU usage gonna stay at 50 to 60%. Rainbow Six Siege is a pretty CPU intensive title. As you can see, our CPU usage is resting at 60 to 70% all the time, and GPU usage is staying between 55 to 60%. This game is a pretty light title to run for a 3070, but with CPU bottleneck present, you're gonna get around 280 to 290 FPS. I mean, with TA rendering set to 50%, this game is not even running at 1080p. You will get around 291 FPS with Vulkan and 259 FPS with DirectX 12 on 3600 and RTX 3070 in Rainbow Six Siege. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a pretty good looking game. The performance in this game depends upon CPU a lot. This game even takes advantage of the hyper threading. In this game, you're gonna face a little bottleneck. Our CPU usage is gonna stay between 55 to 65%, and GPU usage was staying above 90% all the time. And with a Ryzen 5 3600, you're gonna get around 85 to 100 FPS in this game with 3070. Note that this game is running at maximum possible settings at 1080p. Now let's talk about Valorant. First of all, just look at the CPU usage in this game. I mean, it's a pretty light game for a 3070. On ultra settings, I'm always staying above 200 FPS all the time, but due to recording, I was staying between 180 to 200 FPS. This game is so light that my GPU was just staying at its base frequency of 1755 MHz, and my GPU fans were not even spinning. Now let's talk about Red Dead Redemption 2. I mean, look at those clouds, look at the lighting. In this game, you're gonna get around 80 FPS, but if you go in the western part of the map, for example towns like Armadillo, you're gonna get around 100 FPS average because of lack of vegetation in those areas. Even though this game was released in 2018, it's a pretty heavy title to run. In this game, our CPU usage was always staying between 40 to 50% all the time, and GPU usage was above 90% all the time. This game is running with everything set to ultra. Now let's talk about the game I love the most, Forza Horizon 5. I mean, look at those textures and that GTR for sure. In this game, our CPU usage is staying between 40 to 50% all the time, and GPU usage is staying above 95% all the time. In this game, you will get around 100 FPS average. I mean, 100 FPS in this beauty just signifies the possibilities of this combo. Now let's come on a conclusion. If you wanna play single player games with this combo, you will face no difficulties. You will run every single player game around 80 to 100 FPS at 1080p and around 60 to 70 FPS in 1440p. And if we move to the multiplayer side, you will face a little bottleneck, but with the presence of bottleneck, you will averagely get above 200 FPS all the time with settings set to max. So this was it guys. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe.